And for more on the crisis in Afghanistan, we're joined by our foreign affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, good to see you. You know, as we just saw there, the Taliban is waging a bit of a propaganda campaign to show that it's in control of the country. How successful have they been in affecting the world's perception of them?
Well, look, first of all, look at what we just watched. We watched a report in which, you see our correspondent, a Western correspondent, embedded essentially with the Taliban on one of their trucks. That speaks directly to what, from the Taliban's perspective, you could say, is a relatively successful PR campaign. I use the word PR because there's really a sense of image doctoring here, right? The Taliban for decades has had a brutal image as fundamentalist zealots. During their last period of rule, we know they were known for floggings and stonings and mass executions and torture and disappearances. The litany goes on and on. Now what we're being told, and we've been told it really even before the capture of the Taliban, these reassurances constantly to the Afghan people, but also to the outside world. It's like those old British wartime posters, keep calm and carry on. Nothing to see here. Keep going. Trying to tell the international community nothing to worry about. We have things under control. The Taliban trying to stress this image, and we saw a little of it in Catherine's report, this image that, unlike the previous government, that corrupt government under the previous Afghan government that collapsed, look at the streets of Kabul now. Law, order, calm, telling people go back to work. Go about your business. Life will not change. And enlisting journalists in that PR mission is all part of it. The Taliban are anything but fools. They know that all of the world's eyes are on them. They know that the international community keeps essentially saying, we will judge you by your actions, not just your words. These actions, among those actions, are letting journalists get literally a front row seat on how the Taliban would like to show the world that it is restoring order, law and order to Kabul, a semblance of normality after years of, as they would say, abnormality. Now, clearly, there are a lot of people who aren't on the streets. Why? Because we're told they are fearful. They are in their homes. They don't want to venture out into the streets. They don't know what will happen. And there are equally other people who perhaps welcome the Taliban rule, perhaps not as many in Kabul, but perhaps definitely in the rural hinterlands and the more conservative areas of Afghanistan where they were fed up with the government. So some of the PR campaign does speak to a reality, a certain resonance among Afghans who do welcome the Taliban. But the sense is that they're all also, a lot of people feel fearful and a lot of people not buying this PR line.
Well, so U.S. President Joe Biden has been roundly criticized for how this withdrawal has played out. Is there anything he can do to change the narrative and make this seem like a success?
Let's say the White House is pulling out all stops right now to try to focus on what they would like the world to see as not those chaotic images at the airport, which Biden's acknowledged. He's called them heart-wrenching, heartbreaking, but the smoothness, relatively speaking, under these circumstances of the evacuation campaign. Now 70,000 people and rising, one of the largest mass evacuations in such a crisis in modern history. That's what the White House attention would like you to be on. But Biden's also playing the long game here with American public opinion. During the war, the 20-year war in Afghanistan, Americans really had very little attention span for the war at all. It was rarely talked about. The major news networks in the U.S. barely covered it. You could count the number of minutes in a year where they spoke about Afghanistan. Suddenly, all of this concentrated attention is on Afghanistan in a very short time amid these justifiably horrible images of the chaos. What the Biden administration is banking on is that, one, Americans will have a short-term memory by the time the elections roll around next year, 2022, and that their main focus is going to remain where it's been over the past couple of years right now, which is on management of the pandemic, COVID-19 pandemic, and the general economy, which has been blighted. And those are the issues which will be front and center on Americans' radar. And polls seem to suggest that they might not be wrong, the White House, in calculating this, that Americans at the end of the day are not going to beat up on Biden, perhaps because they will not have these chaotic images front and center in their minds. Doesn't mean that his rivals, especially in the Republican camp, are going to do their utmost to make this a big issue in the political campaigns next year and to make sure Americans remember those images. But they're banking on the fact that Americans are fed up with what they see as these unending wars. They want out. And 1 in 3 Americans asked last summer in a survey what was going to happen earlier this summer, basically said 1 in 3 said it was a war that could never be won. So there's that long-term image embedded in Americans' minds. But he's saying this is a war Americans never really thought much about. Their attention spans are short. They're not saying this explicitly, but that's their strategy. They're banking on it. And when push comes to shove, Americans, his priorities are elsewhere, and Americans' major concerns are elsewhere, not in Afghanistan, but on their own economy and on the state of the health system right now with COVID and the pandemic.
Okay, our foreign affairs commentator, Douglas Herbert. Doug, thanks for that context.